Amen. Catherine is not here. She got a one-day license and performed the wedding of her nephew yesterday, and she's got 70 wedding guests to feed. Second Sunday in Stewardship. We are busy with our theme, The Balancing Act. And today it's Time and Talent Sunday, so I titled my sermon, Where is God Calling You to Build BPC? To answer that question, our text this morning comes from the most darkest and devastating time in Jewish history. The time when the Babylonians came in 586, destroyed Jerusalem, burned the temple and the city walls and the gates, and left it in utter desolation, and took 40,000 people away into captivity. Later on, the Persians would overthrow the Babylonians. And so different people would come back and rebuild. First it was Zerubbabel, and then Ezra. And today's text in 445 BC, Nehemiah gets permission to go back. Now, this text at best is a big genealogy. It's a yarn fest. You might fall asleep, Phil, by the time we get to the end of the 32 verses. But if you know what you are looking for in that text, this story is one of the golden nuggets in Scripture, especially about God's people working together for the common good that God calls us to do. So with that in mind, I redacted the text. It's going to be a bit shorter. We're going to skip through stuff because there's a million names in it. So here it goes. Nehemiah 3. It starts off by saying that the high priest set to work with the fellow priest, and they rebuilt the sheep gate. Now keep that word sheep gate in mind. We're going to get back to that later. Next verse. And then the people that live 8 miles away in the small city of Jericho, they show up and come and help the people in Jerusalem. And next to them, the following guy builds. Verse 3. The sons of so-and-so built the fish gate. They laid the beams, they set the doors, the bolts, and the bars. Verse 4. Next to them, the following person builds. Next to them, the following person builds. Next verse. Next to them, the Tekoites comes. Now, the people from Tekoa, they were the sheep herders. So you have people from the city, you have people from the rural areas. The poorest of the poor are the shepherds. But their nobles, their rich people, would not put their shoulder to the work of their Lord. So the people who sleep out in the cold at night, the people who do not take a bath, who smell like their sheep, they are the ones showing up, the manual laborers. But the people with the soft hands, the noble, the rich, we're not going to build. Next verse. The following person shows up and builds the old gate. Next verse. Next to them, the repairs is done by somebody who's a Gibeonite, and then somebody who's a Meronite from the city of Mespah. Next one. Next to them, a goldsmith builds. Next to them, a perfumer. Now, another word for perfumer is not just somebody who mixes perfume, but it could also be a pharmacist, somebody who mixes different ingredients together to alleviate people's illness. Builds the broad wall. Next verse. Next to them, someone else builds, who is a leader, a ruler of a half of a district of Jerusalem. Next one. Another person goes and he builds opposite his house and makes the repairs right there. Next one. Somebody comes and he is from Moab. He builds the Tower of the Ovens. Go. Next to them, a ruler of another half district with his daughters. Next verse. Someone who is an inhabitant from Zanoah comes and builds the valley gate. Someone else comes and builds 1,000 cubits as far as the dung gate. I'm not going to explain that one to you. Recycling facility. Verse 14. A ruler of half of a district again. Next one. The district of Mizpah. They repair up to the fountain gate. They do everything that is together with the wall and the door. Next one. After him, someone came another leader of half of a district of another region. Go on. You awake? After him, the Levites. What's a Levite? No, it's not a priest. Levite is not a priest. A priest is what today's pastor is. A Levite is what today's deacon. A Levite is somebody who served in the temple and helped the priest. So it's like a deacon. Goes and builds with a ruler of half of a district. Next verse. After him, their family came and made repairs. Another ruler of half of a district. Next one. Next to him, somebody that's a ruler from Mizpah. So not only has the town showed up, but the ruler also from Mizpah shows up. After him, another person comes and builds at the door of the high priest. They show up at the manse. Okay? Next one. After him, someone comes, repairs another section. After him, the priests show up again, and with them the men of the surrounding areas. They made repairs. Next one. After them, from Benjamin, another of the tribes, opposite their house they do the building, beside his own house. Verse 24, after him another person shows up. And then the temple servants living show up. After him, the Tekoites, they showed up twice. It's like Mexico with youth and Mexico with adult. They can't get enough of this building. They repaired another section of the wall. Next one. Above the horse gate, the priest made repairs. This is now the third time we've heard about the priest. Each one now opposite their own house where they live. Next one. After them, Zadok shows up opposite his own house. Then shows up the keeper of the east gate, the guy who locks the door at night and unlocks the door so that the city is safe. After him, somebody opposite his living quarters. Next one. Then the goldsmiths show up. Again in verse 32, the goldsmiths and the merchants show up. Next one. That's our text. You awake? There's some important things I learned from this. It is as if a devastation comes to an ant colony. Have you ever disturbed an ant colony? You put your stick in there and you just see all the ants fly out and the scurry. Or you pour water in an ant hole. Or there's a fire. And all those ants instantaneously know what to do. Each ant has a function. Rebuild or protect or gather food or protect the queen or look after the eggs. Have you ever seen an ant colony move their eggs? One of the most sweetest things to see how they carry those little white eggs to a new nest. Well, this is what happens in our story. Each person in the story has a function. And I want to briefly look at that. The story starts with whom? Who was the first builder? Can you remember way back? Who was the first builder? The high priest. The high priest and the priest. So this story starts by saying, if we're going to do something and rebuild, we might as well start as the leaders, as the spiritual leaders, and do the work ourselves. Because if we as the spiritual leaders build, then the people of God will see what we're doing and they will actually buy into the dream. In fact, the priests are mentioned 3 times. They built the temple, and now you will see on that picture, at the top, that square structure, that's the temple. And we heard, interestingly enough, they built at which gate? The sheep gate. Why the sheep gate? Why start there? Well, the sheep came through that gate, and the holding pens were close to the temple, that the priest could just go, take a lamb or a kid, not a child, a kid from a goat, and sacrifice the goat or the lamb at the temple. So if you want to have decent worship of God, you need animals for sacrifices. You need to fix the sheep gate, otherwise the sheep are going to escape. And then the priests go, and they go help someone else build. And when they're done with building the temple gate, and they're done with helping someone else, they go to their own house last and build right across from there. Well, if the high priest is building, and the priest, which is today's pastors and elders who govern the church, the life of the church, well, if they build, they inspire other people. Who? The temple servants. The people who are contracted to help clean and take all the sacrifices away and make sure everything is set up for worship. It would be today our custodians. So the priest and the high priest and the temple servants and the fourth group associated with the temple, the Levites, the people who provide for the service of God, the modern day deacons who care for people's well-being. So all the spiritual leaders of ancient Israel, they show up to build. And that inspires people from Jericho and Mizpah and Gibeon and Benjamin and even sheep herders from Tekoa to leave their sheep to show up. Not once, but twice the sheep herders show up to come and make a difference. And we read that this story is more than just males. Women come alongside their men, their brothers, their fathers, their husbands, and they build with them. The story tells of rich neighborhoods like Jericho and poor shepherds who built alongside one another. Did you see how often it says in our text, next to him or next to them? It means that they were literally working shoulder to shoulder, making sure that nothing was left to chance. Every part of the wall was built. But it's not just people that have the skills. Most of these folks don't know how to build. Have you ever seen a high priest build? No, they only know how to do worship. And yet they learn to build. Did you see who else built? The goldsmiths. The people doing fine, delicate work with gold and silver and jewelry. They have no idea how to build a wall, yet they learn. Did you see who else built? The perfumer, the pharmacist, the doctor, the nurse, the physician. They don't know how to build, they learn. Did you see who else built? The merchants, the people who sell animals, who sell goods and fruit, who work with money, the people with the soft hands. They don't know how to build a wall, yet they learn how to do it and do the entire gate. And so we have a mixture here of ages, young and old. We have different social status of rich and poor. We have men and women, married, unmarried, different ages. Everybody does what they can. It's a balancing act. Because it says often in our text that the first logical place to start working is where? We spend most of your daylight hours at work. That's what the priest and the high priest did and many others. They went to the place where they worked. And then they would go back to the place where they lived. And they would build their house. Or in their community go and see, oh, my neighbor doesn't have enough kids. Let me give some of mine and help build my neighbor's wall. And they worked shoulder to shoulder with each other for one common purpose. To build this wall and fix it. Now in the next chapter, chapter 4 and chapter 5, I forgot the rulers. The rulers of half a district would be today the people who are leaders. CEOs, CFOs, chair people, executive directors, assistants, people who serve on boards, people who are the employers. And when their workers see, boy, these people work, they say, let me go as well. This is like a boss of a company saying, I'm going to give all my people off and I'm going to lead the charge. I'll go build. If you want to come and follow me, they see the example, they go do it. And so all of these people work together, and then the enemy sees, boy, they're going to finish this wall. And if they finish this wall, we cannot attack them. And so they threaten attack, and so Nehemiah says, well, take up weapons. Have your spear or your sword in your left hand, and have your building equipment in your right hand. And they built. Now, to give you a frame of reference, to rebuild the temple of that Herod the Great rebuilt, took about 60 years. Guess how long it took them to rebuild this entire wall? 40 places, 9 gates, 4 towers. Guess how long it took to build them? Let the bidding start. Give me numbers. 3 months. A year. 5 years. What's the text? Chapter 6, 15. So the war was finished in 52 days. 52 days with everybody working together. And I thought to myself, either it's a miracle, and God blessed us, But for me, the bigger question is, how can they do something in 52 days that had not been done in 150 years earlier? You know, sometimes we see something that's broken and we just walk past it. I've got toilet lever that's like that. My wife is on my case about that. Or you see something that's not right at the house, and you walk past it day by day, and you simply don't fix the thing until your wife tells you to fix it. They walk past it year by year, decade after decade, and they simply didn't fix it. And here comes Nehemiah, and he acts as a leader, and he brings all of the people of Jerusalem together, and they do something amazing. I want to make the comparison between building that wall and that city and the gates to building BPC. Now, I'm not saying that BPC is broken or dysfunctional. I'm saying we can make BPC even stronger to build on what Betsy just shared from the pulpit. We've gone through some tough times, but we're in the rebuilding phase. We're in the phase where we can say, there's some work there, or some work there, or here we're not involved enough. And that's the analogy for me. And for us to do this, we need every single person. And we're going to do that next Sunday. With your time and talent, can I have your sheet? It was in your bulletin. And on the sheet, mark for us, what are the things that you can do that you think you are passionate about? And there's going to be people at every single station. If you go to each part of the wall, there'll be somebody to tell you exactly what you need to do. We have a lot of you that have been here 10, 15, 20, 35 years. And we've asked you year after year. I feel like an insurance salesperson today, trying to sell you life insurance, and you got already enough of that. Thank you. If you are retired and have more than a few hours a week, volunteer. We need office assistants. Dave and I don't have any assistants for the past 5 years. We need somebody in mission. Great things are happening in mission, but there's no staff person to assist. If you can give 5 or 2 or 3 hours a week, we would so appreciate it. If you are working and building a family and still paying the mortgage and just trying to make it through life, then help us from your computer. We need people to organize and get things going and send out emails and enthusiastically get people to work with us. There's a place in BPC's wall for every single person. Whether you're a leader, whether you're a follower, whether you're a directive person, whether you're a relator, whether you're an analyzer, we need every single person, young and old, men and women, member, non-member. Take a look at the sheet. I'm going to give you a chance during worship to look at it. Come next week and ask somebody. If you walk up to the youth table, Elsie, and you say, in your Scottish brogue, I want to help out the youth, but I'm scared of the youth. And Christiana says, but Elsie, we need help with the youth. She can explain to you exactly where you can help the youth. If you can't drive them around, bake cookies for Mexico. This thing is not in detail. If it was detailed, it would be 10, 15 pages long. So come and talk to all our directors, our elders, our team members. Find out about our adult ministry, about our small group, about School of Christianity, about youth and children, and worship, and mission, and fellowship. Where do you need me for 5 hours a week or for 5 minutes a day? How can I make a difference? God is not done with our church. God has put us in the corner of San Vicente and Bundy for a reason for the past 81 years. And that is that BPC can make a difference in our community. That we can have even stronger ministries and make a difference. But the challenge is this. It's the balancing act. We are aware that our lives are so busy. In fact, it's easier for you to write us a check than to give us of your time. Because time is so precious in our city and in our lives today. And so my prayer for you is to prayerfully discern in this next week. What are the things that I need to do in my life that are important and essential? But also, how can I serve God and BPC? May God give us wisdom.